Hello, Eternal Life fans. I'm here at the Laughlin, Nevada Cryonics Convention. We're speaking with David Pizer. He's the guy who put this whole convention on. So I'd like to start out, to introduce David, I want to start out with a great quote of his that I love. And he says, as long as we still have to die someday, the main reason for living now should be to kill death. David Pizer. I just love that quote. So David, I want to ask you about how long have you been in this cryonics movement, and what is your main role in promoting cryonics? What is it that you do for cryonics?
I first heard about cryonics a little over 30 years ago. I was at a sales meeting, and I was in the audience, and the boss was up there, and he'd like to start the meeting with some jokes and things, so he had a newspaper article, and this is in Arizona, and he read it. He said there's this company in California, and at that time anybody in California was considered kind of a nutsy, right toward the end of the hippie era, and they freeze people at their legal death so that they can bring them back in the future, and they can continue to live on, and hopefully by that time they'll have figured a way to end aging and they can maybe live forever. I think they might have also read Robert Ettinger's book, The Prospect of Immortality, whoever wrote that. And everybody in the room, I had to laugh because the boss was, telling the joke, except me, and I got up and walked up to the desk in front of everybody. I wasn't even thinking about it. I said, "Can I have that article, please?" And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he said, "Well, yeah, I guess so." And he handed me the paper, and I said, "I'll see you later." And I walked out of the room back to my office where I was, and I looked up. We didn't have the internet and stuff. We made some calls. The name of the company was there. The guy answered that was monitoring, and I said, "I just heard about this cryonics. I'd like to join and sign up." And he said, "Well, we'll send you some papers and this, and when you get around to it, you should buy some life." And I said, "You don't understand. I mean, I want to join right now." And I had them overnight me the forms and everything. I hung up with him, got my insurance guy on the phone, bought the policy. The insurance guy said, "Well, I'll be by in a week." And I said, "No, you don't understand. I want the insurance today, and I want you to come down now." And I had a small business at the time, and I'd given this guy a lot of insurance business. So he showed up, I got the policy. The next morning the papers were there. We went with the old Xerox machine, copied everything, overnighted it back to them, and to the best of my knowledge, that was the fastest sign up ever in cryonics. That company eventually went out of business, and a couple years later, and been 29, 30 years, I found out about the Alcor Life Extension Foundation and switched over to them, and I've been with them ever since. Why are we doing this? What's my motivation?
Yeah. It's been said that cryonics, being frozen, is the second worst thing that can happen to you. The first worst thing is being dead.
Well, yeah, actually the way that saying is, a lot of us old timers remember that. I don't remember who coined it originally. The second worst thing is dying and being frozen. The first worst thing is dying and not being frozen.
Yeah,
so you're
being cremated or buried.
And that's the way we believe, except that we say it so that non-cryonicists, they understand what we're saying, but we don't really mean dying. When I was involved on the other side in management of Alcor for 11 years. I was on the board of directors, vice president, the treasurer, and helped with some suspensions and other things, although I'm not a technical person. But we don't feel like we're cryopreserving. That's the word that replaces. We don't say we freeze people anymore. the process now. If our scientists hear us say we're freezing people, we get a slap on the hand. You know, it's cryopreserve. Freezing causes a lot of damage to the cell. Cryopreserving minimizes or eliminates that damage.
Would that be what's the difference between cryopreservation and vitrification? What are the terminology there?
Well,
what's the difference?
I guess cryopreservation is the overall procedure, and vitrification, which, you know, with cryopreservation would include the storage and everything, where the vitrification is in the actual preparation of the body to go into the tank. But it's because of vitrification that we say the end result is no longer freezing. Freezing causes expansion, and the vitrification minimizes that, and instead of ending up with a frozen product, you end up with a product that's more like glass. And so anyhow, we have to say cryopreservation.
Okay.
But most people think of it as freezing. That word came first.
So I couldn't agree more with you that the main reason, you know, what we should all be doing, the primary focus should be to end death. And what reason is that so important to you? What are your personal motivations for why ending death is so important to you? Is the idea of living forever, is that appealing to you?
Well, living forever, it's another way of saying not wanting to die. As long as you never die, the default is you have to live forever. If you say I don't want to die ever, then you know, if you say I don't ever want to die, well, people, they can relate to that, but not everybody. Some people want to die when their time comes. Living forever sounds more selfish if you say, well, I'd like to live forever and do this technology and things, unless it's in a traditional religious way. And if we're talking to some people and you say, I want to live forever, you sound selfish. But if you say, I want to die and go to heaven and live forever, they say, oh, now you're a good guy. So. But frankly, I believe most cryonicists are people who enjoy life, and so they don't want to die. Now, if they got real old and their body was decrepit and then they were going to live forever like that, they wouldn't want that. So what's implied when a cryonicist says, cryonicists say, I don't ever want to die, I'd like to keep on living, possibly forever, they mean if it can be a happy life in a healthy body. And most cryonicists believe that technology will advance so that even though you once reached a point where you grew real old, that can be reversed and you can then be grown back to a younger state. The difference between being in what we would call an 18-year-old person's body and a 90-year-old person's body and changing it back, it's not a magical problem. It's simply an engineering problem. The difference between a young person's body and an older person's body is just the way it's engineered at the time. And if it was this way once, then we know that somehow technology will be able to re-engineer it again where you can bring back that state. Just like people today buy all these old classic cars and they restore them, and when they get done, they look like they did in 1955 or whatever year the car is.
So one of the founding fathers of cryonics is Robert Ettinger, and a favorite quote of mine of his is that he said, "Being born is not a crime, so why must it carry a sentence of death?" I mean, what a great quote, because dying is so unfair, isn't it? The idea that you're just gonna cease to exist, enter into oblivion, it's a very scary thing, and cryonics gives people hope. Would you say that that's true? It's a good thing about cryonics?
Yeah, I think that for people that don't hold a lot of faith in some type of a traditional religious afterlife, there's some faith involved in cryonics, whether it's a justified faith or whether it's just something that they make up to make them feel good. I guess you could debate that all day long. I've been around it for 30 years, and I think that there's enough evidence out there now that you could say that if you were to get a good preservation today with the team at your deathbed to preserve you, and then you were transferred into your doer, and your company you were with was financially sound and well managed and able to exist for 150, 200 years, that it would almost be certain that you'll be brought back then.
Awesome. So what would you say is the would you give a percent chance to it that it would actually work? Do you have, because it's no guarantee, but how optimistic are you that it's going to work?
I'm very optimistic.
Very optimistic.
I don't know the percentage, my formal education is mostly in philosophy. I'm not an engineer. I mean, I know a little bit about all the various sciences and things. I cannot see any laws of physics or medicine that you can pull out and quote, and you can look at them and you can say, well, assuming that this law, Einstein or Newton or some of the new people, assuming that this theory is right, there's no way this can work. That doesn't exist. So in principle, I feel 100% certain that it could work. Whether it will work or not, then that's going to depend on how things are done. There's got to be a little bit of luck involved too. That your suspension goes right, that you die in a hospital that's friendly and lets the cryonics team there and has everything hooked up, and the minute you're pronounced, the preparation starts, as opposed to having a heart attack while you were in the wilderness in Alaska and there were angry grizzly bears around to boot. Well, then your chances go way down.
So cryonics, for most cryonics members, it's not their first choice, right? They'd first rather not die to begin with. But cryonics is just sort of a last case, the worst case scenario. If they're going to die, it's better to be cryogenically frozen than to be buried. But a lot of cryonicists are doing a lot right now to stay as healthy as they possibly can, living prudently, really taking good care of their health. Like Don Laughlin, right? He's really into his smoothies and his healthy soups, and really, I hear that he's really like a health fanatic. Are you doing anything to safeguard your health so that it's like you could possibly live to the longevity escape velocity, as Aubrey de Grey says, which is basically the point in time where if we live long enough, we might be able to benefit from rejuvenation therapies that could reverse our aging process? Are you doing anything to really stay healthy?
Yes. Short answer. Am I doing everything possible? No. I have a hard time with that. I eat better than I used to. I try to get a little bit of exercise. I keep my brain gets a better workout than my body. I have the best doctors and things that I can afford, and have my checkups and what have you. Things like that. The theory is, for people my age, I'm 73, that I don't think the ultimate final aging reversal pill or protocol would come in any chance of my lifetime. If I was extremely lucky, I could live to be 105 or 110, let's say. And I don't think it'll come in that time, but incrementally it's possible that there'll be advancements for people today that are 60 or 70, or even Mr. Laughlin, who's 83, could come into his age, and then the lifespan of people who take good care of himself, as Mr. Laughlin does, is no longer like right now. It may be predicted that he could, with really good luck, live 20 more years. Well, maybe there'll be some protocol come along that he can live 40 more years. So that gives him 10 or 20 more years. And then something else in that extra time is invented where people are living to be 160.
Yeah.
And then now you're getting up there and you turn 155, and then you turn on the news or whatever, and now the ultimate protocol is available, and this doesn't put a limit on it. This actually begins the aging reversal process. So
yeah, that's what you're describing. That's longevity escape velocity.
yeah,
That's that idea.
so I look at cryonics. Cryonics is not the answer. It's aging reversal is the answer. I look at cryonics, it's simply a mode of travel. It's like a vehicle. It takes you from here, and your body is then in a form of suspended animation and moves you forward into the future, at which time they open the door and you get out of the vehicle. And in the future, this is when these things will happen, not by magic or anything, but just by science.
Can you speak a little bit about the Venturist Society? Is that what, am I saying that correctly? Venturist?
Yeah.
You are a founder of that? Or a
There were 4 of us that started the original organization: myself, my wife, Trudy, Mike Perry, who's our vice president, and also works at Alcor, and a 4th fella named Don Ship, who was more at the time into the life extension part. He wasn't really interested in cryonics. We kept telling him that you know, even with all that, he was into the health and taking care of himself, but you're still going to need the cryonics, but he brought that aspect in. So we're probably the first transhumanist group that actually formed, incorporated, and started doing things today that are called transhumanism. Our 2 principles that we invented at the time. Most groups, we wanted to be founded as a religious group, or we actually wanted to be a church, and the government gave us a hard time on that, so we took the 501c3 as a religion, and later on, now we have gone back to our original design. We call ourselves a church. We wanted to be a religion so that we could honestly have our members carry a card that says, I have a religious objection to autopsy. So we have to have a moral principle and a religious principle. So our morality is our members merely have to promise to always try to do what is right. We thought we invented that. Later on, I found that Kant, that was one of his main principles. And our other principle is our religious principle, and that is our members have to affirm that they will try to end death through technological means.
Awesome.
That turns out to be a transhumanist statement, and our people were making that pledge 28 years ago when we founded it.
So is the Venturist Society like doing things for anti-aging, to give funding to anti-aging research, like anything like that?
We don't do any anti-aging research. We don't do any cryonics research. We're a philosophical support group.
I see.
We may find some anti-aging ideas and pass them on or promote them, or we're getting to be a little bit more respected now within the overall chronic community, and we might stand behind things that we think are good for the community. But we're more a support group, an idea group. Although we do have 2 things. We have our backup trust that for our members that are in suspension, if the company that is suspending them or to go out of business. We would go in there if they had 200 patients and 40 of them were ventures. We would take the ventures patients out if we could get the legal possession of them and continue their suspension somewhere else. And our members carry a little card that says they have a religious objection to autopsy. Whether that would stop a coroner from doing an unnecessary autopsy or not, we don't know. If that ever happens, then that'll be our first litigation. So that's basically the things that we do. And we put on this convention now, which is brings a lot of people together. And
great convention for connecting with other like-minded people, meeting new people. So what would you say is like the biggest reason why more people aren't signing up for cryonics? What is the hindrance there? What's causing them to be so, not wanting to do it?
Well, 50% of the people on the planet, let's say adults today, don't really want to extend their life. They might belong to some religions and things because that's what they have to do in the community. But from what I can tell of all the years I've been studying this and asking people questions like you're doing, I'd say every other person really doesn't want. So that now the other 50% don't want to die. They'd like, but most of those people have already, when they first heard about religion or as a child going to Sunday school and things, believe that they can escape death through religious ways. So now that leaves a small percent of the total amount of people, the people that are atheists, agnostics, and that could be 5 or 10% of the people. And a lot of atheists who admit they're atheists are people who, the word I like to use or the thought of it is they've made their peace with death. They went through this terrible, painful period of their life thinking about that they're going to be dead someday and how horrible that was. And then after they lived with that thought long enough, they got used to it. It didn't scare them anymore. And they come up with these goofy ideas like death gives meaning to life, or it's natural, or blah, blah, blah. A lot of things in nature are really great. And then the rest of nature sucks. You need to change the things that are natural that are not good for us. And some people don't get that connection. They just think they've heard of 3 or 4 natural things: natural good, natural good, natural good. They come to a bad thing and they think natural good. It's not good. You see a young child with a terminal disease, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. In Kim's case, I think she was 23. Dying with a brain tumor and cut off in the middle of life, and there's no way that anybody that's sane can look at a dying young person and maybe even a dying older person and say, yeah, that's good. It's not good, it's bad.
I agree completely. I just love that. I myself am surprised that more atheists especially, you think would be flocking to indefinite life extension, try to extend their life, but as you said, they kind of make peace with this idea that they're going to be die and get oblivion in. And I think it's a coping mechanism, right? It's kind of like the parable of the fox and the sour grapes. If you think something's out of your reach,
that's a good analogy.
You're going to tell yourself that you didn't want it to begin with. It's not actually a good thing, and I think that's
my destiny.
Yeah.
Stardust.
Exactly. So I think most people have some kind of coping mechanisms with death.
Yeah, and then to finish your question, so now there's a tiny little bit of people left that think that there's no other chance, death sucks, and they hear about cryonics. So why don't even that tiny percentage, if that was 1%, would be 1% of 8 billion people. So you see, there's only about 1,600 people that are signed up and funded. So, that number should be huge, but then the last obstacle is they don't think it'll work. Because if you ask the lay person to describe cryonics, they say you die, they freeze you, and then they bring you back. But the first premise is, or the first part of that is wrong. You don't die. If you die and they freeze you, they're not bringing you back. You suffer legal death. Legal death is not biological death. Legal death means your heart quit beating. Now, if you don't do something about it, legal death will eventually evolve into biological death. You lay there at room temperature for a day or two, and your body gets into the decomposition thing. Your organelles are releasing enzymes, they're eating up the cells from the inside, your body begins to putrefy, you're dead. Especially in the brain part, when this decomposition or putrefaction destroys the synaptic connection and the, what popular word now is connectome, but the whole system that comprises your mind. Once you get enough connections, it's kind of like in Alzheimer's, when you get enough beta amyloids in there destroying the ability for the neurons to communicate and what have you, then you're probably dead. I don't think you're going to bring you back if you're too far gone.
And that's why it's so important that if you're signed up for cryonics, you got to make sure that you're immediately rushed into the cryonics facility, and so they can do that as soon as possible. Like a lot of these speakers have been talking about different notification systems to notify emergency workers in the cryonics facility itself. Do you have anything like that? Do you have any notification systems so that you don't like accidentally die alone in your house and your body's not found 2 weeks later and it's too late?
I have the old-fashioned one that was way before they invented it. It's called a wife.
Okay.
My first line.
That works.
We watch out for each other, but there are times when two people are sleeping in the same bed and one of them dies and the spouse or partner doesn't find out until the next morning, so it's not as good as some type of a device. That was Ben Best talking about that. He's been an advocate for that, and rightfully so. I'm probably at the point now where I feel like there's some of them that are good enough, and they don't have that much intrusion or inconvenience that it's probably time maybe to start wearing something like that.
Have you been successful in convincing any of your friends and families that weren't signed up to sign up for cryonics?
Sure.
And from your experience, what is the most successful arguments to make with people to influence them to actually sign up for cryonics?
Successful? Well, it's, I guess, a form of Pascal's wager. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, okay. Yes, very much.
But you have nothing to lose. Let's say you were going to be legally dead and if you didn't do anything pretty quick, you're going to become biologically dead, so you have a team of cryonicists put you in the capsule and they keep you there for a few hundred years or longer, and then someday some expert, government certified, so we know he's telling the truth, comes out and tells you that there's no way we're bringing this guy back, and then at that time you want to wake up just for a minute and say, I'd like a second opinion and a third. Generally, at first it just sounds too good to be true, and we've been trained, rightfully so, in society that 99% of the time when something sounds too good to be true, it is. But those of us that keep our eye open all the time, every once in a while, that 1%, it is true, and it is really good. Every so often something really wonderful comes along. So it's something that takes some time to explain to somebody that doesn't know anything about it. When you first explain the concept, except in my case, the first time I heard about it, I'd walk up in the embarrassment in front of all my colleagues and ask for the paper and everything. I didn't even want to wait for the guy to read it to me and write it down and everything, because then he might realize that I was interested in it and not give it to me, so I didn't want to take that risk. So I just went up and got the paper from him and left. I'm an exception that people that, some people come in. My wife took 10 years. At first she said, you know, it's okay for you, honey, and I'll support you. I don't want to do it. And then more and more, last year she was at this convention with us, but she got more involved, and she, you know, learned about the science and things like that. And then over a period of time, you know, she said, you know, I'd like to do that. And I said, well, I'd like you to do that. And she signed up. That was probably, you know, 15, 20 years ago.
Awesome. Here's a personal question. What do you enjoy most about life? Like what you seem very enthusiastic about being alive. You really love life. So I want to know, what is it that you enjoy most about being alive, and what is it that you're looking forward to the most about the future?
You know, there's not one thing in life that I would say this alone makes it worthwhile. I mean, I have a really strong marriage. I've been married to my high school sweetheart for 56 years. And, you know, we've had ups and downs and things too, but a really wonderful marriage. And I had a good upbringing in that my parents told me that I could be successful, and gave me a lot of confidence in life. But really, I have to say that I just enjoy being alive, and all the things that encompasses, all the challenges every day when you get up. It's not having a lot of money or a fancy car or beautiful house or this or that or anything else. It's the thing that gives me the most pleasure in life is going out every day and working and facing the challenges that come at you and solving problems, being engaged that way, and having some successes and, you know, some failures, and even being good at, when you have a failure, of not letting it devastate you, of learning how to recover from those things and getting back in the game. And that's just what life is. I guess I enjoy the journey part, you know. I never want to reach the final destination.
That's a great answer. I agree. You know, life's a struggle, but that's part of what makes it so good,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes, I agree with you.
Absolutely. So, if Eternal Life fans, how can they stay notified about future conferences? Can you give them a plug for the website Venturist Society and how to stay up to date? And if they're interested in cryonics, where would you recommend that they go to find out more?
Oh, yeah. First, let me say, the Venturist, the reason that we chose that word, I was looking for something that sort of in a word said what we're trying to do. So I came across the word venture in the dictionary, and it said an adventure with risk. And I think the risk is what makes the adventure into a venture. You can have adventures all the time, and we love to have them, but if they're a sure thing, they're not as meaningful and enjoyable as if there was some risk involved and you succeeded anyhow. So we kind of like that word, that because we were thinking mostly of cryonics, and so cryonics is going to be an adventure, and it certainly is, and there are some risks involved at the time, especially. There isn't the risk, as I said, if it doesn't work, you haven't risked anything because you're going to be dead anyhow. That's not, society can't come out and say, you shouldn't have tried for that, we're going to make you double dead. You know, dead is, you can't get any worse than that. So that's, that sort of explains, you know, what we're all about. What was the second part now?
Where can they go to stay up to date?
So our website is venturist.info.
And I'll put the links, it'll be in the description.
Yeah. You know, my friend and fellow venturist Mark Plus handles the computer stuff, so you might check with him. And there's a little bit of stuff there and on Facebook. We're mostly active within the cryonics community, although now when we started doing the conference last year, promoting it a lot on Facebook, and I think, I'm old school, and computers are hard for me and all the other people that are my age. They even have computers for children, computers for dummies, and then the worst one, if you're really problems, is computers for old people. That's probably written in the most basic language with lots of photographs and things. So I had to kind of read that. But I'm adjusting.
Now, I'm someone who fears death, and I'll just admit it. I go out and I just say, look, I'm really afraid of dying. I do not want to die. I want to live forever. Would you say you have a strong fear of death that kind of compels you in life, or does having a cryonics membership negate a lot of your fear because you're so confident that it's going to work?
I used to have that fear of death. I may lose my chain of thought, so bring me back. But the first time that I really felt the pain of holding a fear of death was when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And back when we were kids, I think it might have been a little older, because I think I was maybe either in 7th or 8th grade, whatever age, about that age. And there was a friend lived down the block, and once in a while kids would sleep over each other's house. And so I slept over this guy's house. His name was Max. And my dad was a Polish immigrant and a hard-working guy, but he wasn't into science and things. But Max, his father, I think he taught school somewhere, and he knew about science and astronomy. We're sitting out in the backyard with our bedrolls, we're sleeping out in the yard in the middle of the city, pretending we were camping out. And we were looking up at the sky, and the dad was out talking to us a little bit and explaining about the stars and the universe and how old those stars were in the universe. And I had never realized that. And then he went off, and him and Max went in to make some hot chocolate or something for us. And I'm sitting there all by myself, and I'm thinking, these things are billions of years old, and I'm only going to live another 50, 60, 70 years. And in geological time, that's not very long, that I'm going to be dead really soon. And this fear of death came over me, and it was very painful just sitting there. Not a pain like when you break an arm or a leg, I've done lots of that, but a different kind of pain. And I think most people get that, but most people cannot endure that pain, so they immediately, I think that's why a lot of people become traditionally religious and believe in God or heaven, and that makes the pain go away. But back in those days, we didn't have any way to make the pain go away. And so from time to time, I would think about that as each year went by, or you had a birthday. Most people would think, wow, I'm a year older. I'm thinking, geez, I'm a year older. It's a bad thing, because then you have 1 year less to whatever your ultimate amount that you're allocated. And I think that some people say, oh, you've got an irrational fear of death, and I think you must be nuts. Having a fear of death is anything but irrational. If you couldn't do anything about it, then it might be irrational. But today we can do something about it. So then when I heard about cryonics, I signed up right away. But even then, as time went on over the 30 years that I've been signed up, and I can see now that it's more and more likely to work. that has really eased my fear of death, as I think that I have a very good chance, unless something goes wrong or there's an accident or what have you, that I may not have to die. And I don't want to be selfish about it, so that's why we formed the Venturist organization. It's like when a person finds traditional religion, they want to run out and tell everybody the good news, you know. And I hope they're right. That I hope there is a God up there somewhere. I'm very agnostic on almost anything, and but you know, that to me that'd be better if there's this like really powerful God that loves me and everybody else, and you know, lets us have little pains and suffering here to teach us, you know, how to protect ourselves better. But ultimately, in the long run, He's going to be there behind us. It's fine with me. But I don't think there's enough evidence to completely believe that with 100% epistemological certainty that that's true. So it might be true. There might be some other consciousness of the universe that, you know, has some sustaining power to us. There may be nothing. Life may just be a freak accident, and you know, that's okay. Take it, enjoy it. So I'm not as sure as I was 60 years ago that I'm going to be dead someday. And so I guess having a chance, you know, let's say you were in a life or death situation here and the enemy was closing in and there was a whole bunch of them and a little bit, but one of the guys said, well, you know, we may be able to get out of this, you know, and that's not a sure thing, but if we try this or that or so and so. So right away you feel better that you have something that you can do. And that's my little quote there, that, you know, as long as we know that the, you know, survival is not a sure thing, we need to end death. And then after we get that done, then we can put something else on there as our main goal now, you know.
I loved your perspective on God, you know, that you wish there was a God. You know, I'm the same way. I'm an agnostic atheist, so I don't believe in a God, but I admit that it's possible. It's something that I really wish there was, right? But I realize that it's wishful thinking at the end of the day. And but I like that you at least you would want there to be, right?
Sure.
We're not celebrating the idea that there's not a God. I bemoan that fact, that I anguish over the idea that we're living in an indifferent universe. I mean, it's scary. It's harder to live forever living in a universe that's cruel and doesn't care about your survival at all.
Well, I like your point, because there's a lot of atheists that I think they really hope there isn't a God, you know, so they can defeat God or something, and they can be right. And so you and I, we don't feel that way. We hope it's true. We just, you know, we're more people. We need more evidence before we make life and death decisions.
Yeah, I love your perspective on fear too. Just the fear it's not irrational. It's completely sane. I had the same fear. I still have the same fear. Yeah.
It's what keeps us alive. If we didn't have a fear of death, we'd be walking in front of buses.
Exactly. Fear keeps us alive. Totally. And, you know, I think, you know, children are more honest about that fear of death because they haven't developed those coping mechanisms, right?
Yes, they don't realize that it's shameful in their parents' eyes or somebody else's eyes to say that they have so as they grow up and they say, Mommy or Daddy, I'm afraid of dying in front of other people, the parents scold them and say, you know, so then you're sort of taught that it's that way, but I think it's, I'm trying to think of that slogan that, you know, real men love Jesus, real men this, and maybe we could have one, real men fear death.
Yes, I love that. I love it. Absolutely. You know, I think the fear of death, I often say that, you know, the fear of death, it just means you love life. It's like, it's two sides of the coin, right? If you love life, over here you're gonna fear death. It just makes sense, because death is the opposite of life, as far as we know, right? When you're dead, you get oblivion. Very interesting perspectives on life and death. I really relate very much to your mind, fearing death, loving life. I respect people who have an instinct to survive, a strong survival instinct. And I think I see a lot of that in the cryonics movement, that people want to live. And that's something that I can really respect. And the hatred of death, right? Even the name of this convention, END DEATH, that's very...
Well, I had to call it kill death, but
yeah,
even we have to, fall within certain boundaries. We don't want to piss everybody off, just a few people at a time.
Well, what was it that you said you were looking most? I wanted to hear what were you most looking forward to about the future? If you were to wake up in 1,000 years, if they actually resurrect you, if they can reanimate your body, what are you looking forward to? What do you think the future is going to be like?
I think a part of it, maybe a third of it, will involve things that we cannot even imagine now, just as people several hundred years ago couldn't imagine how we're going to live today because we have airplanes and television and what have you. So there's no sense, straining your brain on that part. And depending on how transhumanistic we allow ourselves to become, I think there'll be some people, just like there are today, who will want to live what will be called the traditional human life. They won't want any brain implants. They certainly won't want to be uploaded in a computer. They want to be natural, except immortally natural. No. And there'll be the other extreme, that people are, doing odd things like they do now. They put, see a person that is a beautiful person, and then for some reason they had to put a bunch of tattoos or holes in their head or something. There'll be people that, can do really freaky things with your looks. There'll be that kind of stuff. And even if we don't work in the way that we do now, where we have to physically do the work, and then most of that stuff's done by robotics and what have you, that there'll still be work, there'll still be jobs, and there'll still be competition. And, not everybody will get involved in it. Some people will just take what the government gives them. Probably your necessities will all be provided. Everybody will be entitled to a house and food and clothing. For instance, building a house, won't be real hard like today, where you have to have hammers and nails and people working. You'll have little seeds that are programmed, and you throw it in the ground, and a house will grow there. So it'll be pretty inexpensive to have a nice house or a vehicle or things like that. But there'll still be. People will still have egos, and they'll want to be more recognized than their opponents, and people will still want power. The big drive in humans is a sexual drive, so you'll probably be able to order a perfect mate physically, with whatever turns you on, and then mentally have the, whatever mind you want. But we'll always have to have challenges. I don't think there'll ever be a point, even far into the future, where everybody has everything and they can sit down like God did on the seventh day and say, now I can rest. I wouldn't want that to happen. I would want to be involved. I would want to compete. We want to, do the things that give life its meaning.
Exactly. Yeah, paradise on earth, creating a heaven on earth might look different than what people tend to think. It might be much more like this world with a lot of challenges and things like that. But there wouldn't be like a bunch of starving people in Africa and all these horrible things that go on.
Yeah, I think we could have paradise on earth right here today if we could just change that everything. This is the way it is. We go to work, we car, we make a living, blah blah blah, and someone's explaining life today, and then we die. Well, you just take that part out, or then we get sick. And if you take out the get sick and the dying, the fact that you have other problems, that's fine. That's good. You solve them. You get out of a mess once in a while. Sometimes you don't. You have to pay the punishment, and you get through that, and then that's your paradise on earth. So we're real close to it right now. We just have to remove sick and dying.
Yes.
And then we can.
And I want to touch on what you said about, that it's not this selfish thing only. I mean, that's part of it, that we have a self, you want to live, and you don't want to die, and that's a self-interested thing. But once you have that perspective for yourself, and once you understand how important it is to survive, you're going to want that for other people. And that's why you started the Venturist societies, to bring that message out, right? It's that idea that you want to share that idea, helping people to live for as long as they want to live forever. In my case, that's why I want to promote that idea that people can live forever. And so yeah, it's not just a selfish thing, right? We care about ourselves, and we care about helping as many other people avoid death.
Okay, I like that. You can be my press agent. I think that a lot of people are like that. When they really find something good, they just can't wait to run out and share it with other people. And some people are that way, some aren't. I think it's the single most important thing, ending death, that humans can do, as we said in my little quote there. So we're putting the information out there, and to those people that want to get involved, welcome aboard. And to those people who say it's not for me, fine. I have nothing against them. The world's big enough for everybody here right now.
Yeah. Now, I really love this quote. So I started with the quote. Maybe we should finish with, if you can add a second sentence to this quote, right? As long as we still have to die someday, the main reason for living now should be to kill death. If you add a second part to this, why should that be the main reason? What's so important about killing death? What's the main reason why people should care about killing death? If you could just finish that up.
Because death is not only is it the worst thing that can happen, but death comes along and erases all the meaning that your life had. So it wipes it out back to zero, as if you had never existed. I mean, your memory can live on. You might have been a great person that did great things, but that's not you living on. That's somebody else that knows about you, but it's in their lifetime. So why waste and negate everything that you once thought important? If you're willing to die willingly, then nothing else logically should have any meaning in your life, because you're not going to have it very long, and pretty soon it's going to be completely reversed. By the way, when I talk to people who are traditionally religious and they say, well, we think cryonics is a bad thing, this or that, I have this thought that either we got here through life one or two ways. One, it was an accident. Well, if it is an accident and you really benefited, like finding some gold or something, then then you must protect that find yourself. There's nobody else to rely on. But if life is a gift from God, when I'm talking to a religious person and they say I'm a bad person, and I say, well, what's the difference between me and you? Well, I go around saying good things about God and everything, and the gift of life from God, and I appreciate it. Yeah, you go around saying that you like the job, and I go around doing things. So if somebody gives you a gift, which thing is going to show your appreciation the most? The guy that says, hey, thanks a lot, I really appreciate that, and does nothing to preserve that gift, or the other guy that's glad to be alive and is showing that appreciation by preserving that gift, taking care of it, keeping it in good shape. So I truly believe that if we prove that cryonics is going to work, that most people of traditional religions will make it part of their religious philosophy. It's against God's law to commit suicide, either actively, but it's also against God's law to passively commit suicide, and not doing things to prolong and extend your life is a passive form of suicide. So religious people claim to be following God's law should almost automatically be trying to extend their lives as long as possible.
I agree with that, definitely.
Tie all that in, I don't know.
Definitely.
Work on it.
I really like what you were saying about, basically that death essentially renders your life meaningless. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you were never born to begin with,
It's
right?
like you were never born to
I
begin with.
completely agree. Like, a slogan I put out there a lot on the Eternal Life Fan Club is that a temporary existence is meaningless. Because basically when you're dead, it's like you never... It's like people, okay, like if we came from nothingness and we return back into nothingness, people try to put some value to this line between 2 points of nothingness.
Yeah.
What's the value there? It's like there's no point,
That's
right? It's pointless.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely right.
I very much agree with that.
Imagine, picture some person that's making a big deal in their life about winning this mate or getting a new car or a job or some credit at the university or all that. But the fact that we have death, it turns a human being, instead of being an owner, into a renter. As long as there's death, you never really own anything. You're just renting it or using it there, and then at a certain time it's gone back to the landlord and you have nothing. So everything that you thought in your life was important becomes meaningless and nothing at the point of death. So why make a big deal about anything if you have to die? Because you can't own anything. You can't even own your own life. You don't own your own family. You're nothing.
I completely agree. And like I've seen like these documentaries, when people die, they just auction off the person's stuff.
Yeah.
It goes on to the next person.
That's it.
And people try to pretend like their life still has meaning, and this is where symbolic mortality comes in, right? They think if they can just leave a legacy, if they can be famous and be written about in stories, they think that gives their life meaning. But from their perspective, as a non-existent person, when they're dead, it's not going to matter.
It's not going to matter, and it never did. I mean, so that it's the loss of everything.
Completely agree.
Life is a short trip, the music's for the sad man. Can you imagine when this race is won? Turn our golden faces into the sun. Praising our leaders, we're getting in tune. The music's played by the madman.